In this video, we're going to talk about scope validation. Let's go to our console application project and open the program.cs class file. Now let me change our book service registration to add singleton instead of add scoped. And since book service depends upon an iBook repository implementation, and we have registered book repository as a scoped service, the book service instance, which is a singleton, will capture its book repository dependency. So the book repository dependency is now called a captive dependency. As we saw earlier, this is a misconfiguration of service lifetimes. But if we run the application, we get no runtime exception. Let's change our book service registration back to using add scoped, and let's uncomment these lines where we are retrieving a scoped service directly from the root dependency injection container instead of creating a scope manually. Uncomment these lines where we are creating a scope as we should. Once again, if we run the application, we get no exception. This means that by default, scope validation is not being done. To enable scope validation, when we call build service provider, we can pass in validate scopes set to true. Now if we run the application, we see we get an invalid operation exception, cannot resolve scoped service from root provider. So we can confirm that scope validation is being done. Similarly, uncomment these lines, uncomment the lines where we are retrieving the service directly from the root dependency injection container, and change our book service registration back to add singleton. So now we have a captive dependency, and let's run the application. Once again, we get an invalid operation exception stating cannot consume scoped service from singleton. This is because scope validation is being done. So when scope validation is turned on, the service provider makes sure that scoped services aren't resolved from the root dependency injection container, and scoped services are not injected into singletons. Let's change our registration back to using add scoped. Now in ASP.NET Core 2.0, scope validation is turned on by default in the development environment. So let's set our Blazor web app project as a startup project and expand the properties folder and go to the launch settings.json file. We see the environment is set to development. Now if we open our simple book catalog service collection extensions class and change our book service registration to use add singleton instead of add scoped and run our application, we get an exception because we cannot consume a scoped service from a singleton. Let's change our registration back to add scoped. In the next video, we're going to talk about disposable dependencies.